Single dad took in widow and her 4 kids cast out by family, unaware they'd become his daily miracle. The morning frost still clung to the windows as Jake Carter stood in the kitchen of his modest Missouri home, pouring 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one he still instinctively made for his late wife, Emily. It had been 3 years since the cancer took her, but habit clung to grief like the scent of her perfume that still lingered on the edge of memory. Jake, a 38-year-old mechanic and single dad to 10-year-old Lucas, had spent those years just surviving, working, parenting, and trying not to feel too much. But nothing could have prepared him for the knock on the door that cold February morning. Standing on the porch was a woman, wet hair, worn coat, and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to hope. Beside her stood 4 children, the oldest barely a teenager, the youngest no older than 5. Jake recognized her immediately. It was Rachel Delaney, the widow of his high school friend, Aaron. Aaron had died suddenly in a car accident 2 months prior. Jake hadn't seen Rachel since the funeral. "I'm sorry to just show up," Rachel began, her voice thin from cold and fear. "We didn't have anywhere else to go. My family said they couldn't help anymore. Said I needed to figure it out." Jake didn't say anything for a moment. He glanced at the kids huddled behind her, eyes wide and shivering, their bags at their feet. Then he did the only thing his heart would let him do, he opened the door wide. "Come in," he said quietly. "Let's get you warm." That was the beginning. Jake moved Lucas into his bedroom and set up sleeping bags in the living room for the other kids. He turned his small home into a noisy, chaotic sanctuary. Rachel tried to refuse his help every step of the way, offering to clean, cook, find work, and pay rent with money she didn't have. But Jake simply shrugged and said, "You do what you need to do. We're not keeping count here." The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. A week, maybe 2. But as winter slowly melted into spring, something unexpected happened. Amid the mismatched socks, burned dinners, and late-night cries from little Leah who missed her dad, a strange and beautiful rhythm formed. Lucas, once quiet and withdrawn, began laughing again. He taught Rachel's son, Sam, how to play catch, and helped 9-year-old Mia with her reading. Rachel began to smile, a real, soul-deep smile, especially when Jake came home greasy and tired, but still asking how her day was. Jake had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a guy doing the next right thing. But one night, as he tucked Lucas into bed, the boy looked up at him and said, "Dad, I like our big family." Jake's heart clenched. Something had shifted. This wasn't just helping a widow and her kids. This was something more. But not everyone saw it that way. One Sunday, Rachel received a call from her sister. She offered a room, but only for Rachel and the 2 youngest. Said taking care of all the kids was too much. It was a lifeline, but it came with a cost. Rachel cried in the backyard for hours that night, torn between keeping her children together and the fear of burdening Jake any longer. Jake found her sitting on the back steps, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "You're not a burden," he said softly. "You don't have to keep saying that," she whispered. "You didn't sign up for this. For us." He sat beside her, silent for a moment. Then he said, "I didn't sign up for losing Emily either. Life doesn't ask permission. But this, us, it feels like the first good surprise I've had in a long time." Rachel looked at him, tears glistening in the moonlight. "What if I mess it all up?" Jake smiled. "Then we'll mess it up together." It was the first time Rachel leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder like it had always belonged there. Weeks turned into months. Rachel found part-time work at a local diner. The kids began calling Jake Uncle Jake, though little Leah once slipped and called him Daddy in her sleep. He never corrected her. Instead, he sat by her bed until she fell back asleep, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger. One summer evening, the whole family, yes, that's what they were now, gathered in the backyard for hot dogs and lemonade. The kids were running around with sparklers, chasing fireflies as music floated from the kitchen window. Rachel stood at the grill, laughing as Jake dramatically overcooked another burger. Lucas pulled Jake aside, tugging at his sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure, bud. If Miss Rachel and the kids stayed, like, forever, would that be okay?" Jake knelt down, meeting his son's eyes. "Would you be okay with that?" Lucas nodded eagerly. "Yeah. I think Mom would want us to share our hearts, not hide them." Jake's throat tightened. He looked up at the house, glowing, alive, full. Then at Rachel, who caught his gaze and smiled. That quiet, knowing smile. He stood up, tousled Lucas' hair, and whispered, "Yeah. I think she would too." The next week, Jake surprised them all. Over dinner, he pulled out a small box. Everyone froze, expecting a ring, perhaps. But instead, it held 5 tiny keys. "One for each of you," he said. "Because this house, it's yours too. No more, just staying. We're a family, and families belong." Tears flowed freely that night. Rachel sobbed into his chest. The kids danced around like it was Christmas morning. And Jake, a man who had once felt like life had hollowed him out, stood there full in every way that mattered. Love hadn't come in the way he expected. It came wrapped in brokenness, in noise, in dishes left in the sink and mismatched socks. But it came. And it stayed. In a world that often feels cold and unkind, where people are told to look after their own and keep to themselves, Jake chose differently. He chose love. Not the kind from fairy tales, but the real kind, messy, selfless, and fiercely human. And in return, he got more than he gave. A boy who laughed again. A woman who remembered how to hope. A home filled with life, light, and laughter. Sometimes miracles don't look like angels or fireworks. Sometimes, they look like a tired mechanic opening his door on a cold morning to a family in need. And finding his own heart healed in the process. Jake didn't just take in a widow and her 4 children. He found his daily miracle. One giggle, one meal, one shared life at a time.